All right. So, like I said, what we'll be doing today is we'll be covering, well, actually for the next 4 days, we'll be getting into Apex and Visualforce controllers which are written in Apex. The prerequisites for this training is an understanding of object-oriented programming or some sort of programming language. It's going to be pretty code-heavy, I do recommend that if you might want to check out some other resources for things like object-oriented programming if you're not familiar with it, because of the fact that we do make the assumption that you are comfortable with object-oriented programming. This is kind of it's almost a Apex for Java programmers or Apex for C# programmers class. So there's kind of an assumption being made that when we're talking about those object-oriented concepts, that you'll be able to pick up on those. But like I said, the next 4 days we'll be getting into all the details of Apex and Visualforce controllers and doing a large amount of exercises associated with those. Here's our safe harbor statement. Please take a moment to read this. The safe harbor statement, Salesforce.com is a publicly traded company. Any forward-looking or future statements that I make, please do not make operational or purchasing decisions based on anything that I mentioned during this. So, like I said, the full safe harbor statement is here. So please take a moment to read this to understand all the legal facts behind it. All right. So we have access to our training orgs, and like I said, we'll be using those during the class for our lab exercises to create code and then test it out, see what it does. Okay. Trusted IP ranges were at Salesforce.com, so we've already pre-added at least the internal addresses, not Ray's guest one, but we at least have a lot of those IP addresses set up, so we should be good to go on the trusted IP ranges. Okay, the history of computing, at least from our perspective. There's applications have kind of evolved over time, and there's mainframe applications which were host-based, similar actually to web applications in the sense that the dumb tubes were just presentation devices. With client server, the clients became smart, but maintenance was a headache because then the amount of maintaining and updating was now spread out to the entire organization. A lot of application vendors created a lot of applications that thrived in that environment. And now these days, Salesforce.com has created an on-demand platform for providing applications to our customers where people can simply subscribe and utilize those applications in the same way that they might utilize a utility. Okay. Some of the key innovations that Salesforce has pioneered is, the first one is multi-tenancy. And multi-tenancy actually is, it affects the way that our code runs. So this has technical implications in terms of the way that we run our applications. In a multi-tenant environment, there is not only a shared database, so Salesforce customers are accessing a single instance of databases. There are many tables, but it's a single multi-tenant database that our customers are utilizing. In addition, there's also shared application servers. So the application server environment is also multi-tenant, and the things like our search engine facilities are also multi-tenant. Now this has an effect on the way that our Apex code runs. And we'll come back to this when we start to talk about governor limits. So Apex code is definitively different than other programming languages and execution environments, and that other programming environments or execution environments, typically you own the CPU. So if you want to write code that, for instance, does an endless loop, if you want to write code that is inefficient from a database I/O standpoint, you can go out and do that. There's nothing that's going to necessarily prevent you from doing that. You'll figure it out down the road when you realize that as your application scales and you place load on it, that it doesn't scale well, because now if you're doing inefficient database calls, for instance, you're not going to scale past 10 users or 20 users or whatever it may be. Now, the difference between that model and the way that we do things is that we require you to write efficient code. We require you to write code that does not, for instance, enter into an endless loop and just go out and cycle and consume CPU resources. So governor limits are part and parcel to the multi-tenant environment that our applications run under. And so we'll come back to this. This is an important difference between Apex and other development environments. In addition, we also have a subscription model. Our end users, our customers subscribe to Salesforce.com as opposed to making a upfront capital expenditure to purchase the software. We take care of maintaining the systems, security, backup, failover, all that stuff that goes into that, as opposed to customers hosting the systems on their own. Before I continue, I just want to point out there's a lot of benefits to a multi-tenant environment. Because Salesforce is really working on a single version of an app at any given time, it allows us to innovate faster. It gives us economies of scale because we are not supporting multiple single-tenant environments. Scalability is much improved because we are over 1 million end users using it, over 50,000 customers. For us, we already have a massive parallel system, so adding additional users to that environment is something that we can more easily do. And then automatic upgrades. One of the things that we do is we enforce or we send out upgrades to our system automatically. We also give our end users the ability to enable different features as they become available and turn them on as they'd like. We kind of look at the world in two different ways. We look at the world in terms of the fan, which are the different off-the-shelf applications that we provide. And then there's the stack, which is the underlying set of platform technologies that we provide. So over here on the fan, we have our Salesforce automation application, which is one of the leading SFA applications in the market. In addition, we also have marketing applications, ideas, service and support. So a whole number of off-the-shelf applications that our customers can utilize with pre-built functionality that allows them to sort of hit the ground running. These applications are built on the Force.com platform. The Force.com platform is the foundation for both of the off-the-shelf applications that we offer and also custom applications that you might create. So over here on our stack is the platform, and we've broken it up into different areas that you can perform customization. For instance, you can create a custom user interface in the form of utilizing Visualforce pages. You can create custom logic, that'll be our focus this week, creating things like Apex triggers and Visualforce controllers, which are written in Apex. Integration as a service, we have standard web services that are available. We can also create Apex code that does callouts to an external web service so we can integrate with external systems. Database as a service, as you know, one of the things we can do is create custom objects. They are conceptually similar to creating custom tables. And then we have fields, which you can add to those objects. They are roughly similar to creating custom columns within one of those tables. So we can extend the data model. We can extend business logic, customize, and then same thing with the user interface. So, in addition, we have partners on the App Exchange who are also creating applications. And all of this runs on the same data centers that our off-the-shelf applications run on, so in that shared cloud environment. At Salesforce, we kind of, in terms of developing applications, we look at the world in terms of, we kind of split out our stack into two separate sides. There's the declarative functionality that we have, in other words, the setup menu, whereby our administrators and developers can go into the product and using our point-and-click tools, they can customize their applications. So from a user interface standpoint, they can create a custom application. They can create tabs associated with those applications. One of the things that happens when we create a custom object, which is a part of our data model, is it generates a page layout. The page layout is the default user interface associated with a Salesforce application. From a business logic standpoint, there are things like workflow rules, approval processes, validation rules. So a number of, once again, different point-and-click features where our developers can create fairly simple formulas to, for instance, do things like enforce data quality. Okay? And then finally, the data model. Here we have our objects, fields, and relationships. This is most similar or would map to something like a relational database. So the objects being similar to custom tables, the fields like columns, and then much like a relational database, we can define relationships between these different objects. Over on the programmatic side, for the custom user interface, there are Visualforce pages. Visualforce pages are the means by which we have the most flexible, customizable user interface, web-based user interface that we can create for our end users. Visualforce pages do a number of things. First of all, they can contain standard web content. So your HTML, your JavaScript, your Flash. It's a very flexible, open model for creating custom user interfaces. You can do things like utilize style sheets, include static content like Flash or images or movies. It allows you to create a truly custom user interface. From a business logic standpoint, we can create custom controllers, so mapping over to the MVC model, similar to creating your own custom servlet in the Salesforce model on our platform. You can write a Visualforce controller, a custom controller, in Apex code, and then from your Visualforce pages, be able to call that code to handle your requests, do something like a lookup in the database, and then forward the user to another location. And then for integrating to external models, we could integrate to external systems using our web services API or callouts, or once again call-ins using the standard web services API. In addition, though, I would also mention that whether you're doing things programmatically or declaratively, the data model is the same under the covers. So whether you're writing Apex code, you're writing that code against the same sets of objects that you would be creating workflow rules that reference. All right, so during this week, we're going to be utilizing a recruiting application. We chose a recruiting application because people tend to be very familiar with the process of recruiting. It's something we've all gone through as a part of getting jobs. In addition, it's not necessarily CRM oriented. So it's something that is a custom application that is completely separate from our off-the-shelf applications that we provide. So let me just tell you a little bit about the recruiting application. The recruiting application, it tracks things like positions and candidates and job applications, interviewers and reviews. In other words, different positions that we would offer, whether they be open or closed, candidates who are applying for those positions, job applications representing a specific candidate applying to a specific position. Our interviewers, we're tracking the people who have the responsibility to interview these candidates for specific positions. And then they're ultimately going to create reviews or write reviews, enter data into the system, what they think about the qualifications of the candidate that they interviewed. As you can suspect, this is a relational model. So one of the things that we do is, for instance, the job application references a candidate via a lookup relationship. In the same way that you might have the primary key, foreign key relationship in a relational database, here what we have are record IDs, and as I said, the job application would reference a particular candidate and a particular position using that record ID. We have a bunch of policies and procedures, and when we're doing this class, we're going to be talking about, especially when we get to lab exercises, different use cases and business requirements that we need to fulfill using Apex code. So for instance, we're going to have requirements and processes and procedures where we need to create the logic that's going to enable the end users to complete the tasks assigned to them. Here is the entity relationship diagram, which represents the different objects which are available within our environment. So just to recap, some of the important ones are over here. The ones that we'll be focusing for the most part are things like the job application. The job application, we would call this a junction object between the candidate and the position, in the sense that it enables a many-to-many relationship from candidates over to positions. So for instance, a single candidate can apply to many positions, and a single position can have many candidates applying to that position. The job application representing the junction between a specific position and a specific candidate applying to that job. The review object here, will also be utilizing this one. This one has a master detail relationship with the job application. The offer has a lookup relationship with the job application. In addition, we'll also be doing some stuff with the interviewers and the salaries, a lot of this other stuff, but I'd recommend that you kind of focus on the job application to candidate and the position, because that's where a lot of the stuff we'll be doing will be centered around those, kind of that axis. All right, so let me switch over to my web browser and do a quick demo of the application, just so show you some of the basic functionality. All right, so in our recruiting application, this is our recruiting application. Much like other Salesforce.com applications, we can access it by the drop-down menu in the upper right-hand corner. So one of the things that I can do here is, for instance, click on the Positions tab. So you'll notice, by the way, that we see positions, interviewers, job applications, reviews, all those different objects I was referring to previously. And one of the things we can do is we can create a new position or define a new job that's going to be available. So if we do my job, which is Senior Technical Instructor, we can fill out a form. Here we can specify whether it's a full-time or part-time job. This is a pick list. So here's all the standard data types which are available. Here, this one is a new position, and so on and so forth. Here's a lookup. We have different date times that are available. So it's a fairly standard Salesforce application. Like I said, we're going to be creating the Apex code that's going to be running behind this. By default, it already does a lot. But by creating the Apex code, our Apex triggers, and our Visualforce controllers, we're going to be able to create a highly customized application that does a lot of things. The first thing I'll point out to you, and this will be our first lab exercise, is there's a hello field, and if my hello roll trigger is still turned on, this is a very simple trigger that will populate this hello field, which is a custom field on my position object with the string rolled. So in addition, here's a required field for job application, job description, does stuff. And now if we click on save, what happens is that we save that record. And as you'll notice down here, we'll be creating different triggers that do different things, but here's an extremely basic one that populates that hello field with the string rolled. We also have some other stuff that will be occurring. We'll be doing some things associated with automating or creating dynamic approval processes by populating different fields within our records with approvers who would be related users referenced in our approval processes. So there's a lot of different functionality that we're going to enable as the day or the week goes on. In addition, like I said, there are interviewers. Interviewers are employees who are assigned to positions to perform a task. We're going to be creating a Visualforce page, or utilizing a Visualforce page that utilizes a custom Visualforce controller to create a cool multifunctional page that allows us to assign multiple interviewers to a single position in one page. With job applications, we're going to create a wizard and we're going to create the controller that's behind the job application wizard, where a user can create a new job application, alternatively define a new candidate within that wizard, and we'll be creating the code that stands behind that multi-step wizard. Here's our candidates. We have different candidates applying for our different jobs. As you can see, I was doing some testing and borrowing Barack Obama's name. But one of the things we'll be doing is creating some logic behind these two. Okay? All right, so let's finish things up by taking our quiz. So at the end of a lot of these modules are quizzes, and the idea is a module review for you to recap some of the things that we've discussed. Let me start off here. Sharon Deep, I'm going to ask the first question of you. What I'd like to do is just kind of go one by one in order. So I like to pick on people, and at least I'll go in order so you can kind of predict what question will be asked of you. Ray, what are some customizations that can be made through declarative means? So what are some of the features? So workflows, approval processes. What about from a user interface standpoint? Page layouts, very good. And then from a data model standpoint, custom objects and custom fields. And then programmatically, what do we have available for us to customize the user interface? So the Visualforce pages, we can programmatically create custom user interfaces. Our Visualforce controllers and things like our Apex triggers allow us to create custom business logic. And then the data model, we can either integrate with external models using web services, or we can, at the end of the day, the programmatic environment relies on the same custom data model that we created with our custom objects and custom fields. What are some advantages of on-demand multi-tenant software? So automatic upgrades, so the upgrade process taken care of for you, and the ability to roll out different features as you choose. We also have a feature or new functionality called Salesforce to Salesforce that I think you're hinting at there, where different customers can integrate with other customers. And then it allows us, in having a multi-tenant environment, to innovate faster because we're working on a single version of the application at any given time. Okay, great. What are the custom objects used as a part of our recruiting application? So our interviewers, our positions, job applications, reviews, candidates. So all the standard stuff that would go into a recruiting process in terms of the different types of information that we'd like to track. All right, so we're going to from this point on, the class will be broken up into two separate parts. There's the Apex topics, which are, we're going to focus on things like, well, actually, I'll tell you what we're going to focus on. So the Apex syntax in general, how Apex runs, the way it works, the differences between Apex as being an on-demand language as opposed to different or other languages. We're going to talk about how to operate on data. We have something called SOQL, which is similar to SQL. We also have something called our data manipulation language, which allows us to write to the database or make changes to the database. We're going to be talking about triggers. So Apex triggers is one of the primary mechanisms in terms of customizing our application to change the behavior. We'll get into those. We'll talk about handling bulk data. We'll talk about testing. We'll talk about exceptions and error handling. We'll talk about deployment topics, things like deploying from a sandbox environment to a production environment. And then web services, so creating web services, our own custom web services, and then doing callouts to other web services. So from the Apex environment or Apex code, doing a callout to another system. And then email services, both sending and receiving email within the context of Apex. So here's the different sections. Most of these sections have lab exercises at the end. In the beginning, we're going to be focused. It's going to be a lot of lecture in the beginning because we need to set the stage for the different syntax elements that go into Apex and the different stuff that makes it a unique language. But as you can see, we'll get through all those topics that I was mentioning. As I said before, the necessary ingredient here is just an understanding, for the most part, of the object or of an object-oriented programming language. One of the things that we provide in the lab exercises are solutions. So if you're not a quick coder in terms of doing the lab exercises, don't sweat it too much, because we do have the solutions available. You can go to the solutions for a little inspiration, or just take some of the completed code and copy and paste it in order to see the solution working. Okay?
For more information on Salesforce.com training and certification, please visit www.salesforce.com/training.